I'm Jenna Poth-Gray, founder and artistic director of Forward Theater Company in Madison, Wisconsin. And this is Theater Forward, a twice-monthly conversation about theater from a local, regional, and national perspective. From Madison to Manhattan, we're excited to share insight into our own company while exploring issues surrounding theater in the Midwest and around the country. Welcome to episode 81 of Theater Forward. For this episode, I am thrilled to be talking with our guest, Randy Bryant, Executive Director of 10 Chimneys Foundation in Genesee Depot, Wisconsin. For those of you theater lovers who have never heard of 10 Chimneys, you are in for a treat. Welcome, Randy.
Thank you, Jennifer.
It is so exciting to have you here, partly because I love talking with you and partly because I suspect many people listening to this conversation have not heard of 10 Chimneys, and I can't wait for them to be introduced to the wonder. And so can you start us off by just telling us what 10 Chimneys is and a little about its history?
Sure. So 10 Chimneys is the estate of Alfred Lunt and Lynn Fontanne, who were the premier stage actors from the 20s to the 60s. And their estate was truly the place for artistic expression, where all of the theater greats would come. So Katharine Hepburn, so Laurence Olivier, Helen Hayes, Carol Channing, they all spend their summers out here. So when you think about theater history, 10 Chimneys is really ground zero for American theater. Today, we offer tours to the public. It is a house museum that's dedicated to American theater. But it's also a place for artistic expression and inspiration.
Having been there, I've taken the tours, I've participated in some events there. I just have to sort of vouch for how magical an experience it is for someone who is invested not just in the American theater and the value of that, but also in the contributions that are made here in the Midwest, in this region. To know that there's this tiny little hamlet, Genesee Depot, yes, sort of halfway between Madison and Milwaukee, out in the countryside, and that you can show up and find this gorgeous little house and know that these legends would come and vacation here is it's pretty magical to walk through the kitchen and see the recipes and the handwriting on the phone pad. Oh, here's Carol Channing's phone number, and Olivier slept in that bed. It's cool.
It's a really credit to the town of Genesee Depot, and I really want to give them that credit because for this to exist, and it exists for years, and they were really very careful to make sure that the Lunts had their privacy. So while it's a well-cared secret, there's pros and cons with that, because it is one of these great historic places in Wisconsin that many people did not know was here. And even today, many people don't know. But when they do find out, they're really just in awe because 10 Chimneys is almost like a time capsule. It's a place where it's great for escapism. You're escaping into the gentility of a world past. And so we're thrilled to have restored it. And so while it's open to the public and it's for the public, its mainstay has really been for American theater.
Tell me a little more about, so when did the foundation start? And Sure. Tell me a little more about some of the works that the foundation does, aside from obviously maintaining the estate and overseeing this opportunity for house tours.
Sure. So the foundation, basically it started a little earlier. Lynn died in 1983. And when she died, her brother-in-law, George Bugbee, he basically took the estate, closed the doors, locked it up, and left it as it was. So we have everything from their toothbrush, their toothpaste, their underwear, their Listerine, everything as it was with the Lunts, which is different than most house museums because typically it's an interpretation. This is what the Lunts, what their life was. And so for 12 years, it was locked up. As you can imagine, with any house, especially an older home that has not been cared for, it was in an era of decay. And so the foundation purchased it in 1996. And $12 million later, we have 10 Chimneys, all polished up and ready for the public. So what the foundation offers, it's not only is it the tours to the public, but it's also for American theater. it's programs for, there's retreats. And so whether it's the Actors Guild or the Directors Guild, they're actually coming out here for retreats in order to not only just rejuvenate, but also to, in many cases, as a think tank. In addition to that, Cabaret in the Drawing Room at 10 Chimneys, where you have New York cabaret singers that would come in. They play on the Noel Coward piano. We have other programs that really focus on the actor themselves. And our preeminent program is the Lunt-Fontanne Fellowship Program, which is for actors that have a minimum of 20 years of acting experience. And they work under the tutelage of a actor that typically has 30 plus years. And under that tutelage, they work on various different projects. So we've done Against Type with Felicia Rashad, where these are roles that you always wanted to be considered for, but would never have an opportunity to play. With Alan Alda, we did Spontaneity on the Stage, which is really fantastic. But, Olympia Dukakis was with Chekhov. And so several of the actors remain in residence. So Olympia Dukakis in residence, Jason Alexander, Felicia Rashad, Stephen McKinley Henderson. But I'm happy to say we started the program with Lynn Redgrave. When you think of why was Lynn Redgrave so important? Well, the Redgraves and the Lunts were very close. And so Lynn Redgrave was actually named after Lynn Fontanne. And during the war, the Lunts offered to take little Lynn Redgrave and to keep the kids here at 10 Chimneys so they would avoid the war.
And the fellowship, talk a little more about the fellowship, because, I have always just been so thrilled that program exists, because I know it's really supporting regional theater actors. And I know that companies around the country can nominate an actor that they work with. So to talk a little more about that.
Yeah, let me give it to you in detail. So basically we have the partner theaters, and typically they're the Lord theaters or Shakespeare theaters around the country. And today we have 84 partner theaters that we work with. And then they nominate up to 3 actors each year. They go through a process where we look at them, and it really is based upon those actors that are really highly respected in their community. And many people call it the mentor program. So whereas, they come out, they've been mentors to others. Now this is where they come in order to rejuvenate themselves. And then working under the tutelage of this master teachers, and we're trying to avoid calling them teachers, because they're really not teaching. These people are already top in their profession, but they're really coming for that rejuvenation. So they look at ways in which they can be rejuvenated, and also but being able to take the time. Whereas, in theater today, everything is rush. And so you really don't have the time to even to perfect your craft even more so, or look at those things that, hey, I really like to focus on this. So, and as the Lunts did with many others, they really focus on what are the aspects of the craft that we really need to pay greater attention to. And what has come from that also are the workshops that we do, because just like the Lunts, they will pull together directors, playwrights, actors, and they would work on developing a play. Well, we're doing the same thing today, where we workshop many plays that may be in development, but in no way are we producing theater, but we will always be there in order to help those actors, directors, and playwrights pull it together in order to make it happen, bring it to fruition.
That's fantastic. Tell me a little bit about what brought you to 10 Chimneys and what sort of started your involvement with the organization.
Sure. So I've always been a theater lover. I'm an architecture historian and preservationist. But I was living out of the country for a long period of time. When I was repatriating, that's when 10 Chimneys was actually being sold. And so the first chair of the board for 10 Chimneys was a neighbor, and he knew that I had this love for architecture and And so he asked me to come out. I came out and I was just blown away. I mean, 10 Chimneys was really, it was like this shabby place that you knew was one time this amazing, wonderful estate. And I felt that, yes, this really is deserving of being restored. But I was really busy. And then the company I was working for, they asked me to stay longer and manage our relationship in Argentina. So I stayed longer. And then finally, when I was able to be released, I started up at 10 Chimneys on the board. And I was on the board for 10 years. And I had my year gap. And during that time, the executive director left. And so they were doing a search. They had a failed search. And then they, I'll never forget the board chair at the time. We were at an event. And she said, Randy, she said, if you know of anyone, and then she stopped mid-sentence, and you can tell like bing, bing, bing. And so then that's how I came. I always thought it was a great job, a great opportunity. And so I've been running 10 Chimneys now for 10 years, and I'm just happy. I feel it feels all my passions, being a theater lover and, with the architecture as well as just the whole preservation issue. It's been really fun, fantastic.
Well, they're certainly lucky to have you there. Talk a little bit about how 10 Chimneys managed during these last couple of years during the pandemic.
Sure. It's interesting. I have a corporate background, and so in corporations, that you're always preparing for this rainy day, and you're always quarterly focused. And so we have been really preserving cash for a period of time, to be quite honest. I was expecting for the change in economy because everything can't be boom, 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 up, up, up. And so we were really right-sizing the organization and really focused on just what our key mission is and preparing for the downturn economy. We did not expect it to be the pandemic. And so fortunately, we were able to close and really just preserve the cash. And so, but it hasn't been hard. It's been extremely hard just not being open to the public. You want to share the estate to the public. And so not being able to do so was difficult, but also not having the actors in. So all the programming having to stop. So the fellowship, it's been 3 years now since we've had fellows in. And the pandemic has made it hard because, just the preparation for bringing people in is, I can tell you right now, it's 4 times as expensive as it was before. Sure. And so not only do you have the cost, but you also have just the whole mindset of everyone. And then having everyone masked up, that has been really difficult because you don't get the full expression having people in mask. And then it's uncomfortable for the actors to try to express themselves with the mask on.
Yeah.
So it's been hard.
That sigh you gave, I felt very relatable. Well, and Randy, I want to make sure that you have a chance to talk a little bit as well about some of the work that you've really been leading through 10 Chimneys on the issues of racial equity in our field and really putting the resources of 10 Chimneys behind some really creative initiatives to improve things. So I'd love for you to talk about that.
Sure. So at 10 Chimneys, we try to address those major issues that are affecting American theater. And we actually thought it would be hypocritical to miss out on the major issue at the time that was affecting American theater. And so we were having prior to the pandemic, in the March of that year earlier, we were having a summit and we had several issues that were down. Race was one of them. during during the pandemic, we had George Floyd happen, and many other issues start coming up. And so that's when we said this is the perfect time to have the summit. So we put together the summit on racism in the theater. And we had a lot of pushback where people did not want to call it racism in the theater. But we felt that how could you not call it that? Whether you're addressing what's there or trying to avoid it taking place. So we thought it's the appropriate name. And there was so many lessons that were learned, but it was out there, and we felt that it was the perfect time to really address those major issues. We decided not to let it push back, and we felt that if everybody walked out of there feeling that with no emotions and calm, we didn't dig deep enough, because the issues are there, they're real, and you can't avoid them. And what we have found during the summits was that many people were really trying to avoid. They had developed tactics of deflection, and because they didn't want to really hit the real issues. But the other thing is just the systemic racism, how it creeps in, where people unknowingly were participating, and so when they started reflecting, when they started hearing the pain of those that were impacted, but the impact was on many different sides. It wasn't just one way, so there's many different ways of looking at it. And I think it really was an eye-opener. I shouldn't say I think. It was an eye-opener for everyone on many fronts. But the creation of it was really interesting, because we wanted to make sure that you didn't just talk to frontline people, but that you really wanted to, we integrated. So the summit was developed with the board chairs of the theater, the artistic director, the managing director, and then the Black Theater United. So we wanted to get the senior management within theater, pull them together and have them all be in a room and address those issues, those decision makers. And it was phenomenal. It was really just seeing, was there tense moments? Absolutely. Was there people that were hurt? Absolutely. Was there a great awareness? Absolutely. Was there evolution? No question. All these things took place, but people participated. And the one thing that we had was that it truly was Vegas. What happens here stays here, because we had to develop trust. And I think that's one of the reasons why it worked out so well, is that with 10 Chimneys' reputation and being trustworthy with all the theaters, it provided that space that we can work in and really just reveal just the ugliness that was happening within theater, but also looking at how can we correct it? What are the issues that we can what were the things we could put in place in order to make sure that there was an equitable environment for everyone?
Mm-hmm. I just want to, highlight how important and valuable it was that this was happening, because so often the sort of public discourse of what's happening in the theater in America is so focused on New York. And this was a situation where you were pulling together leadership from regional theaters across the country, whose mission and focus is serving the audiences and the artists in their region, and knowing that's where the vast majority of American theater artists work. And so addressing their needs, their concerns, their reality, and to leverage 10 Chimneys' reputation, your own reputation as a leader in the field, to bring people together and to do it in that very safe space. Safe's not the right word, but it is not the right word, but a space that encouraged honesty and trust.
And Jen, you're hitting so many things there, because when you look at it, first of all, it's moving people beyond their comfort. Because if people have their druthers, they would have stayed in a comfortable place. Even within 10 Chimneys, the for me to put myself out there when you really don't have to.
Yeah.
You can stay comfortable, but to put yourself out there and say, we're going to hit these issues. These are there. These are real. And then but the beauty is that the issues came up from the people within the region. This was not us saying this is what it is. We were just the facilitator. We provided the space in order for people to speak openly. And I have to give tons of credit to Chanel Ward, who facilitated the sessions. But I also want to give credit to all those that participated, because you think about to spend 6 hours on a Zoom each time, to spend 36 hours just discussing race, and to have almost 80 theaters that are there, and they have, you have to spend all the time there, but to be committed to it. So it speaks to them that, hey, I was proud of theater, to be quite honest. As hard and as painful as discussions were, I was really proud because they didn't skirt the issue. We really focused on the issues. Many theaters had different ways in which they were going to attack, which is great. But I think that the important message also is that there is no one way and there is no one group. There are many groups that we're working on creating a environment of inclusion, and that are still working today. So no one can take credit for saying that I did this, I did that. We're all working collectively together. The one thing I'm proud of 10 Chimneys is that from a theater community, large theater community, coast to coast, we were able to convene and bring everyone together where they knew this was a serious meeting, where theater was in trouble. And if you think about everything that was going on at that time, theater was paralyzed, shaking in their boots. And this helped move the needle. And so it's something that we will have to continuously work on. I think we know that. In the past, what boards loved in management, that you can wrap it up in a bowl and we put it away. Race will never be that.
Right.
It's one of those things that we're always going to have to constantly work on. And I think that awareness is there. And we had, there were some ugly things that were said, but they were out of ignorance. And I think that's the piece that, on one other, if you ask me, is there a great takeaway? And is that you can't expect for other people to educate you. You have to educate yourself. So, and we had a young, I'll never forget it, she's a young intern. And she was watching the whole summit and she was just amazed. And there was white fragility like you wouldn't believe. Mm-hmm. And she said that white people can't expect Black people to be their Google. They have to do their own search. I'm like, wow,
So. Yeah. Well, as we start to wrap the conversation up, one of the things that I love the most about 10 Chimneys as an institution is that it really does feel like that rare organization in our field that you've got a foot in the past and in the present and in the future. You're preserving this incredible chapter of history in our field. You're doing so much to support the theater artists right now in our present with these fellowships and all these opportunities to come and, as you say, rejuvenate. But then you also, by hosting so many symposiums and retreats and conversations, you have an opportunity to really have your finger on the pulse of what's the future of our industry. And I wonder, if you have any strong feelings from what you've been hearing from folks in your events about what the future of American theater looks like.
Well, there's a few things we have to get together. And, the biggest issue that's affecting American theater today is audience and audience development. Yeah. And so and that's across the country, it's that way. So it's something we're going to have to work on, but it's on many different levels. For example, we talk about inclusion and wanting people to come into the theater and bring in new audiences. But when you bring in new audiences, you have to be prepared also to listen to their feedback. They're not going to look at it and listen to it the way that you're looking at it. There's another perspective that's coming in here. So you have to be open and willing to learn. The other thing is that there is such a major benefit in developing new audiences, because those audiences will then open up other doors for you. And even where the funding, or there's so many different things. And so we have to not be myopic in terms of how we look at things. We really it really forces us to be open. And that's what theater is all about. The one thing I love about theater is that it has really shepherded America along on many different difficult issues that are out there. The other piece that we truly believe here at 10 Chimneys is that London can have its national theater, but our regional theaters is our national theater. And it is our national theater community. And that's the one thing we can't forget. We're all this one community, and it's professional theater. And there's many different levels of professional theater. But I think that the theater that we're offering, you can be really pinpointed in terms of what your offering is and what your mission is in terms of theater. And then you can be very broad. But nevertheless, we will never replace live performance. And I think that that's one thing the pandemic has shown. People are thirsty for it again, but we are fearful today, because we have to figure out what is that balance for us in order to make sure that people's comforts are there. Because the pandemic is, we thought this was a year and done, or 2 years and done. It's not, and so we have to learn how are we going to live with this pandemic or others that will come.
Yeah. Well, Randy, I am so grateful to you for joining us, and for everyone listening. If you are in the Midwest already, or ever find yourself here, make sure you schedule time to go and take a tour of 10 Chimneys. It is something you will never, ever forget.
Well, Jen, thank you so much. And there's so much more that we have to offer. And I just want to say to everyone, whether you're young or you're older, 10 Chimneys is that special place, but not only for American theater, but it's also that place in order to let you see just how we as America how we have grown, and what the opportunities are for us for the future. Because the past, the one thing that we can see is that what did they do in the past? What did the Lunds do? They had a full life, they had a wonderful life. And so we focus on how can you live your best life, as the Lunds did.
Perfectly said. Perfectly said. Well, we will leave it there and say that is all for this episode of Theater Forward, a conversation about theater in Wisconsin, the Midwest, and America. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Jen Uphoff-Gray. Our podcast is produced by Scott Hayden, and you can follow us or share your thoughts on Facebook or Twitter at Theater Forward, as always with an ER. If you enjoyed the podcast, don't forget to subscribe on any platform that you prefer, and be sure to leave us a review or comment. We'd love to hear from you. We're so grateful to have you listening, and we will be back soon for another Theater Forward conversation.